Today's talk is going to be on basically talent and success. Sometimes I group this in with the intelligence section because you can make the argument that talents are a form of intelligence. Other times I put this in its own separate section. You can feel free to look at this however you want to look at this, in whichever place it feels most logical for you. Of course, we're going to open today with a little bit of a discussion, and that is, well, what are your talents? Everybody has something that they're particularly good at, even if it's not always very, very obvious. Trust me, if you don't think you're good at something, why not ask the people that you grew up with? Parents, grandparents, maybe an older sibling, or legal guardian, whatever you have. I bet you they'll be able to tell you what at least a few of your talents are, even if that talent is simply getting into trouble. The next question we have is this concept of, what's more important, being naturally good or smart at something, which is your talent, or your willingness to work through challenges, and why? Americans are both obsessed with talent as well as this obsessed with being willing to work through challenges as well. However, if you just watch the TV, it really seems to be that talent really gets the most of our attention, and we always ignore the challenges. However, most people that get really good at something, they're good at something because they worked through those challenges. So really, you can make the argument very, very easily that it's probably working through the challenges that do way more than your natural talent. Because even if you're maybe not so great at something, if you're willing to work through those challenges, you can end up very good at that and develop this into a form of talent. Of course, here is your joke. I asked my friend the baker, what is the key to being successful in the business and making good bread? He said, you can't just want it, you gotta need it. Ba-dum-bum. When we think of stuff like effective performance and accomplishments and not that type of thing, realistically, most people think of these three main sections. The cognitive, which is the intellectual ability to reason, and then or the knowledge base, that allows us to do the performance. Some people also include interest, and others include the mastery of the material, all of which certainly leads to a effective performance. You do have to technically be able to do whatever you need to do. Interest, hopefully you're interested enough in the material, because if you don't care, well, you might not do it very effectively, as you might if you actually did care. And certainly mastery is a huge aspect as well. Somebody who's much better at something, well, they're going to do better at something and probably are going to have a more effective performance. However, what about this whole concept of grit? Most people haven't really heard of grit. Is only just recently getting a lot of stuff in the peer-reviewed literature. But the whole thing is basically, it's this idea of effort combined with the passion, interest, or whatever, in order to produce this long-term goal. Now, there's a book out there where I'm going to be showing you a video that actually summarizes this book along with pictures, a little bit easier than I can. I still haven't read this book. Trust me, it's on my list. That discusses what is grit, how to get better at your various things, and what makes somebody really successful, especially as far as this whole concept of grit goes. So here we go.
I recently read the book Grit by Angela Duckworth. Angela's a psychologist at the University of Pennsylvania, and she's obsessed with finding out the answer to the question, who's successful and why? She's conducted studies involving national spelling bee champions, elite military training graduates, and top corporate salespeople to determine what was the biggest predictor of their success. She wondered, was it talent or was it effort? Now, our society would have us believe that it would be talent. We have the tendency to marvel at natural talent and overlook the importance of effort. Surveys show that we commend people who put in the effort, but we don't actually believe it can compete with natural talent. We often discount our own abilities when going up against people who have a higher IQ or appear more naturally gifted. But Angela has found the following to be true in study after study. Where talent counts once, effort counts twice. Angela explains this using a simple formula. Talent times effort equals skill, and skill times effort equals achievement. When you apply effort to any base level talent, you get skill. When you apply effort to skill, you get achievement. The science shows that grit, the sustained application of effort towards a long-term goal, is the biggest predictor of lifelong achievement. For some, it's an inconvenient truth. Certain people like to see natural talent and use it as an excuse as to why they would never achieve what those people can, and don't even bother trying in the first place. But for others, it can be liberating, knowing that they're not doomed to mediocrity due to a lack of talent. If they put in the effort, they can achieve great things. Sure, there are some limitations. All of us can't make the NBA. We're not all 6'9". But you could become one of the best players in your local basketball league. By remembering that talent counts once, effort counts twice, we can be hopeful that we can one day become more than we think we can, that we can achieve great things despite not winning the talent lottery. But being gritty is hard. Resisting endless temptations to quit or experiencing failure is extremely difficult to deal with. But Angela says we all have the ability to grow our grit if we direct our focus in 4 specific ways. First, develop a fascination with what you're trying to do. Second, strive to improve each day. Third, remind yourself of the greater purpose. And fourth, adopt a growth mindset. Charles Darwin admitted to not having great quickness of apprehension. To discover the mysteries of natural science without possessing supernatural intelligence, Darwin developed an obsessive fascination and was said to keep questions alive in the back of his mind, questions that related to what he was observing, that drove him to discover the connection between all living things. His deep interest in the natural sciences and constant questioning led him to the breakthrough that we now know as the theory of evolution. So what questions are most intriguing to you? Find the questions that fascinate you, and you'll find the capacity to stay gritty while trying to achieve something great. Next, aim to improve yourself every single day. Compete with who you were yesterday. Olympic gold medal swimmer Rowdy Gaines once said, at every practice, I would try to beat myself. If my coach gave me 10 100-meter swims one day and asked me to hold it to 1 minute and 15 seconds, the next day, he would give me 10 100-meter swims, and I would try to hold it to 1 minute and 14 seconds. Angela says that the refrain of all paragons of grit is that whatever it takes, I want to improve. It doesn't matter how excellent they already are. So how can you carve out time each day to push your abilities and seek constant and never-ending improvement? The third way to grow our grit is to remind ourselves of the greater purpose. Angela conducted a survey of 16,000 adult Americans to determine what was a bigger contributor of grit, obtaining a feeling of pleasure or feeling a greater sense of purpose. She found that people on the upper half of her grit scale experienced a similar level of pleasure in what they were doing, but she found that higher levels of purpose directly correlated to higher levels of grit. Angela says, the most gritty people see their ultimate aims as deeply connected to the world beyond themselves. You could be a bricklayer simply laying the bricks for a cathedral, or you could be a bricklayer building the house of God. It's largely up to you to determine what purpose or greater meaning your work has. Whatever you come up with has the capacity to raise your level of grit. The last way to grow your grit is to develop a growth mindset. Bill McNabb, the past CEO of Vanguard, the world's largest provider of mutual funds, interviewed leaders within the organization to see who were successful and who weren't. He found that long-term success was dependent on a core belief. Those who believe that I can't learn anymore, I am what I am, this is how I do things, routinely fail to move up to a senior level. To be gritty, you need to scrap the theory that your abilities are fixed, because it's simply not true. Neuroscience has shown that we have an enormous capacity to change our brains and learn new skills as we get older. The brain is plastic, and you can mold it through sustained effort and experience. Reflect on a time when you started something new that you were scared you couldn't learn, but you actually did. Use the memory of that experience to disrupt any beliefs that your abilities are fixed. In the end, Angela says that learning to stick to something is a life skill that we can all develop. By remembering that the science shows that grit matters more than talent, and that we all have the capacity to grow our grit, we can develop the confidence to start taking action despite how untalented we think we are. That was the core message that I gathered from Angela's book. She has much more material to help you understand the science of achievement. I highly recommend it. If you would like a one-page PDF summary of the insights that I gathered from Angela's book, just click the link below and I'd be happy to email it to you. If you already subscribe to the free Productivity Game newsletter, this PDF is already in your inbox. Thank you for watching.
Talent development. Really, if we're going to try to develop our talent, however that talent would be, there is usually actually an equal emphasis on the actual talent itself, as well as part of that environment that's around you. Now, if you look at, let's see here, if you look at the circle here, this is actually showing 3 abilities: spatial, numeric, and verbal at a few different levels. So that's overall going to represent general abilities. We do know that there's more intelligences, which we're also going to get to soon, but for sake of argument, we've got 3 for here. Here we have interests, and we do have this hexagon, which lists a whole bunch of different options, whether you like to work with people, things, people, data, ideas, blah, 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 and how you like to work. That is that. So each one of these things can, over time, lead to what they have listed as tenure. Tenure means you're going to be there for a while in your job. And we have options here for how we go about and get a satisfactory thing that we like to do. And if we go through abilities, you do have to have the abilities to meet whichever job you deal with. Have feedback that can go back and forth and help improve your abilities, like everybody else would. Basically, we got, like just like a peer review process that goes back, helps you improve stuff. And eventually, over time, your skills are going to match what the environment needs. That's that satisfactoriousness. I don't know. That seems like such a strange word to me. But that is an actual word, and basically that's what this means. So if your skills match your environment, you may have tenure, may eventually get tenure. So that's just your abilities. Now that doesn't mean you love your job. If you're lucky, your abilities and interests will line up and you will love your job. So, but even you can develop your talent this way, or you can develop your talent through your interests, which you have your interests. They could be reinforced by the system, punish or reward, whatever. Hopefully it's rewarded. Then you're going to get some more feedback, which is what this is. Basically, this is a punishment reward system. And then it leads to satisfaction. How much you like what you're getting. How much your needs, interests match the rewards, maybe your salary, your benefits, whatever. And that could also keep you having the tenured process. So all of this stuff basically can lead to, if not an actual increase in talent, but the perception of an increase in talent, and lead you to having a more satisfactory life. When we're dealing with things like talents, usually we're really referring to what are different intelligences. Things like Gardner's theory of multiple intelligence, really only 2, sometimes 3 of his 8 or 9, depending on if you count the 9th one, are usually even tested on an IQ test. There are so many different other categories out there, which you can argue that they're really very, very important intelligences as well. Most people just don't really think of them because they're not on that IQ test. Most people just call them talents. It doesn't really matter greatly what you're calling them. But let's just say that they are, these different intelligences really are talents. So you may have a very different idea of, of what might be a better intelligence for you. And if you don't really know what you want to do with your life, I am about to go through every one of the main 8. I'm not touching existentialism, sorry. And try to come up with some ideas over how you might learn best and maybe some good career options. If you did take that thing on Literacy, LiteracyNet, or whatever that website was about the theory of multiple intelligences, and it gave you a little quiz where you could do whatever you wanted and try to figure out what your top 3 intelligences were. If you did complete it, it would give you something like this. It would have your main one and then have the next 2 and give you a lot of blurb about it, but also give you the numbers for the rest of them as well. So for example, I did do a screen grab for part of it. Just they give so much information I couldn't get the rest of it. Like it said here that my main one was linguistics. My next one was environmental. My next one down there was interpersonal. So I'm going to, and then the rest of them were in order from there. But I'm going to go through each one of these intelligences. Yeah, you can take this time to stop, go get that test, do it quickly, and you might be able to get a little bit more out of this particular part of this lecture. We get to start off with environmental naturalist as far as a form of intelligence. These people really, really dig nature. And these people are the type of people who could, for example, grow a tomato. They tend to really, really come alive when they interact with nature of any form, whether it's plants, animals, or in the case of an astronomer, just being exposed to the night sky. The way to really teach to students that are very strong in environmental is to have them read stories about environmental issues, have them categorize, classify, or you could actually build, if possible, build some type of nature lab. One of my friends is a teacher down in Florida, and right now he's currently growing several different plants right outside of his classroom, and doing this, turning things into a nature lab. And that type of thing, I was absolutely in awe when he showed me, because that really appeals to somebody who is very nature-oriented. Jobs that these people would like, maybe botanist for those who really like plants. Chef would probably be good because you may actually also have to grow your own herbs, but you're still working with plants and animals, just usually you're going to be cooking them. Environmentalist, that shouldn't be a surprise. Landscape artist, navigator, or which is, every time I think about that, I think of the next one up, sailor. So you could do both. Veterinarian, of course, would take care of a lot of different animals. An astronomer, some people wouldn't really think about it, but what are they doing? They're sitting there and they are outside and looking at their stars. Meteorologist does stuff with the weather, and a zoologist, really likes their animals. Visual spatial. These type of people tend to be a little bit more artsy. They are these type that could potentially, paint a realistic tomato, for example, because of the art, they will tend to be more appreciative of doodling, designing, drawing, than that type of thing. And that's in fact how they tend to learn best. They do better with the drawing, painting, sculpting, creating backdrops, and looking at stuff like videos, slides, artwork, learning through that, either creating it or looking at somebody else's, and puzzle and maze. They really need to interact a little bit more with that and have a good picture type of thing in their mind. Some suggestions here. Most of these, if you see these jobs, are mostly artsy related jobs. Photographer, graphic designer, advertiser potentially can be an artsy job too. Artist, carpenter, because they are a type of artist. A cartographer, that's cartographer is basically map maker. Interior designer, those are all very, very artsy related jobs. But not all of them are artsy here. An architect can kind of go either way. I'm not sure if I mentioned them. They're part art and part very, very building, just like kind of the carpenter is. A dentist, they do have to work an awful lot with space. Just think they might be having to create a mold, for example, of your mouth. Engineer, it is a form of artist. They may not really even think about it, but they kind of are. So they are going to help, build whatever they have to build, whether it's very obvious or not. An electrical engineer, it's a little bit less. What they produce is a little bit harder to actually just see, but mechanical engineers certainly will tend to be more visual there as well, and everything is very strong with spatial intelligence. So bodily kinesthetic, body intelligence. These are the type of people who probably really good at throwing tomatoes at other people. They tend to be very graceful and really can control their body. They might really need to move around a little bit to really learn their concepts. They could act out skits or scenes. They could play very, very physical games, or even build things. If that works for them, that works for them. There sometimes can be crossover between this and a few other forms of intelligence, like the engineers probably like building things too in the previous one. But if we're looking at jobs, a lot of these are things that are very physically oriented. Dancer, coach, athlete, of course, actor and actress. So sometimes I know some very klutzy actors and actresses though, but still, that's something that most of them probably have some good kinesthetic intelligence. Equestrian, that's riding a horse. Carpenter again. Massage therapist, magician, certainly the magician, because they got to pull rabbits out of hats. Mechanic, you got to be able to work on these people's cars. You got to be able to be very clear as to what you're working on, because you might also have to go through and do things. It's very hands-on, but you also may have to do things blind as well. Physical therapist, physician, because trust me, physicians sometimes do have to go in blind, as well as architect, just like the spatial ones as well. Verbal linguistics, those people who are very, very strong with their words. This type of intelligence might really like telling stories about tomatoes. They are probably going to be more oriented towards if you're going to teach them to really like stuff that they have to read or they have to write, stories, word games, puzzles, word searches. Oh, I loved word searches. And this is going to have them have them show up as basically being very well read, well spoken, probably like really bad jokes or puns or whatnot. that's these type of people. They will tend because they can appreciate everything. Jobs that tend to do fairly well with this are, editors, such as copy editors, interpreter or translator, obviously, because a lot of that is very verbally oriented. Journalist, they're telling stories, as the playwright and the poet certainly are as well. Public relations, well, you're trying to hopefully tell positive stories. Also, reporters, that goes along with journalists, I suppose, as well as teachers. They really do tend to do really well because they are going to have to speak and read in order to teach the next generation about, well, what they need to be taught. Logical, mathematical, these people can figure out a surface area of tomatoes. I'm not going there. I'm not trying to figure that out. But certainly they could. They do like to be good with numbers. They very well may really enjoy logic problems and puzzles. That's not to say that you can't, that if you like logic and logical problems and puzzles, that you aren't logical, mathematical. Maybe you're logical and not mathematical. I love logical puzzles, but logical and mathematical is certainly not one of my high points either, but I still love the problems. When you're teaching these people, you may want to get them to really think out loud once they come up with their questions and answers, and try to see why and see their logical reasoning as to why something may be correct or not. They may really, really like graphs, timelines, and they really might like creating maps, especially if they also have fairly high spatial intelligence as well. Jobs, accountant, they like math, analysts as well, investment brokers, so you play a little bit with stocks. Lawyer, that kind of slays me that they include lawyer in this. Maybe because you have to be good at logical stuff, so you can bend it, maybe. Chemist, pharmacist, okay. Pharmacists need to count, and chemists are basically, organic chemistry is very much a giant logical puzzle. Physicians again, computer programmers, again with the engineers, inventors, as well as researchers. Now, just because you're in these doesn't mean you happen to have a high logical or mathematical. If you're really lucky and you do love research, and say maybe you're stronger in something like verbal, for example, sometimes you can just hook up with somebody else, depending on what you're trying to research, of course, which might be a better situation. One of my advisors was a biophysicist, and we worked on biophysics stuff together. He did most of the math for mathematical modeling, and I basically wrote everything up. Both of us were fairly logical, but he needed my ability to write well, and I needed his math ability. So sometimes this comes up and is very, very helpful. So don't think that you can't have this if logical isn't your highest one. So musical rhythmic. These people can write a song about a tomato. I really envy people that have my high musical abilities, because I don't. It's my least one. These people can sing, whistle, hum, do all that type of thing. They love their music. They can replicate tunes so easily. And said, I'm a little bit jealous. When you're going to teach these people, sometimes it's best to have them create a song or a rap themselves. When I ask people to turn in projects, a frequent option I allow to have is them to create a song. to help teach a concept. Think of it like Schoolhouse Rock. Some of my favorite projects have basically been these songs that they do. You can also do music, dance, all sorts of things. It's amazing what you can learn through music. Some of the jobs, obviously, very sound oriented. Conductor, composer, music teacher, recording technician, singer, sound engineer, and musical performer. Sound engineer, actually my father was a sound engineer, has no musical ability. Luckily he eventually moved into video. But so sometimes you don't necessarily have to have a super high musical ability to do some of them. So anyway, interpersonal intelligence. These people might know when someone needs a tomato, or they might sell a used tomato. Although how you can sell a used tomato, I'm not really sure, but I thought it was funny. And I don't know when people really when they know that they need a tomato. Although my husband came up to me and randomly handed me a tomato just like about an hour ago, which was really, really weird. These people are sensitive to other people's needs and moods. If you want to teach them, these might be the people that you want to put in group learning. Cooperative learning, you can tutor each other, group work, social problem solving, that type of thing. Jobs that may require stronger interpersonal intelligence. Again, you're looking at teacher, therapist, travel agent, although I don't know about that one, but all right. Maybe they're saying that you really need a break. I don't know. Child care worker, coach, manager, mediator, nurse, and physician again, public relations. I guess they're helping make that used tomato sound really, really good. And of course, a salesperson also can help you sell a tomato. But yeah, just like to sell a used car, sell a used tomato. Why not? So, interpersonal intelligence. This type of person could self-reflect what their life would be like if they were a tomato. And just so you know, all of this was organized precisely to get this the least, because this is the most ridiculous. I hope you guys are enjoying this joke. So these people are very self-motivated, reflective. They don't want this group project stuff nonsense going on. They just don't. They'd much rather they're much happier working alone. Then they do want their quiet time to process any type of ideas that they might have. These people are going to probably learn a fair amount just by stuff like journaling, orient them towards setting personal goals. Just let them be how they are. They probably will learn better just letting them work at their own pace. They know what they need to do, and they'll get it done. Other jobs that have higher interpersonal intelligence: entrepreneur, not a surprise there, consultant, counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, researcher again, writer, and as well as trainer. So a trainer, training somebody else to do do work. So should we really just be focusing on these various forms of intelligences, as well as potentially what you can do with the tomato? Should we? Realistically, probably not. What about this whole concept of interests? Interests are certainly very important to let you do a good job and to keep your attention. There are a lot of places you can go out and learn, more about your interest and maybe about what jobs would fit in well. But the most popular one is the Strong Interest Inventory, and it is not typically found free. But one that is found free on the internet, various forums, is this whole RISEC. But some people call it that, and you can this is how you spell it, RIASEC. A lot of people just also call it the Holland Code. So if you do a search on Google, you should be able to come up with it under either name. And what this whole interest inventory thing does is it looks at your interests over 6 general categories: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, and conventional. And what it does is it sees what you score on all of them and then tells you what your top 3 are in roughly the correct order. So what each one of these things is we'll just go through one by one. Realistic, there should be some overlap here frequently with the nature-based intelligences. These people like working with gadgets, things. They usually like the outdoors, but they also tend to have a need for structure as well. Investigative, usually most people are thinking about this as being very science-oriented. It doesn't have to be science-oriented. It could also be the police, because they do a lot of investigations as well. But typically, most people think of science. Artistic could be writing, art, could be music, that type of thing. Any type of creative expression. Social, these people like helping others. These are your helping professions: teaching, nursing, counseling. All of that stuff falls under social. Enterprising, well, you like leadership roles, especially if it has a economic objective. There's also conventional. You like well-structured environments and clear chains of command. Probably also like office practices too. There are a lot of jobs that don't fit neatly in some of these. For example, my favorite job in theater is realistically a little bit of A and C. Stage manager. They also, there's a little bit of E in there too, although it's not necessarily a very strong economic. That may be the next level up from them. But the stage manager really likes office practices, would prefer well-structured, well-organized, but they are certainly forms of artists. Their art is more likely to be reflected in their paperwork. There are a lot of other jobs that don't always fit so clearly, and also there are situations where, well, quite frankly, you might still love jobs that are outside of your Holland Code, which is those big 3. My highest 3 were investigative, conventional, and realistic. However, I really enjoy helping people. I do like EMS. I would like to be a counselor. I'm currently a hypnotherapist, so that's the type of therapist there. My biggest hobby is theater. Always loved it, and I've run several businesses. So this doesn't mean that you can't do well in those jobs either. Just others might be a little bit better fit. That's all that really means. When we're talking about this whole concept of mastering skills, which we mentioned earlier, as we mentioned the cognitive side, we mentioned the interest side, or mentioning that as skills, you have to be committed to this task. If you are not committed to this task, you may have a problem. And not only do you have to be committed to the task, you also have to commit the time to that task. If you really like a particular thing, this task, but you have no time, you aren't going to get good. Likewise, you could practice all you want, but if you don't really care, you might not do very well either. So all of this is mastery thing. You really do need both. And realistically, you also should undergo something called deliberate practice, which actually will help you really improve and get better and better as it is. So let's talk a little bit about deliberate practice. I've got a video for you.
Deliberate practice is a mindful and highly structured form of learning by doing. It's a process of continued experimentation to first achieve mastery and eventually full automaticity of a specific skill. A 2014 study published in Psychological Science argues that it can increase our performance by 26% in games, 21% in music, and 18% in sports. Here are some tips on how to do it well. Define success and drill deliberately. Define all the elements you need to practice to become successful. Then drill each element deliberately, one after the other. In tennis, that could be first your serves and then later your leg work. If you want to become a professional barista, first perfect your moves to make the espresso, then your skills to serve the ideal coffee. Plan, reflect, and take notes. Plan out your practice routine, for example in a notebook. After each session, reflect and write down what you've discovered. What worked? What didn't? The idea is to get a clear sense of how a particular session improves your skills, and then to experiment to find new and even better ways to achieve your goals. Go slow. To build a good foundation of muscle memory, practice slow and correctly. If we move too fast, we risk learning and internalizing the wrong skills, which can bring terrible consequences. To achieve mastery, our brain needs time to develop. So start slow and then gradually increase the speed until you give it all you've got. Limit your sessions to focus. Deliberate practice is hard mental work. Limit the sessions to a reasonable duration that allows you to stay focused. This may be 15 minutes if you are younger and 60 minutes if you are older. Cristiano Ronaldo does around 3 to 4 hours of football training a day. Young Shaolin monks practice 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. To keep their attention high, they switch the style of practice every 10 minutes. Maximize practice time. Legendary basketball coach John Wooden used to let each of his players practice putting on socks and shoes so that they learned to do it really fast. By doing this, he maximized the time to practice throwing the ball and discussing game strategy with his team. Track small intervals of improvement. If you practice running 800 meters, count the milliseconds, not the minutes. If you are working out or practice controlling your diet, measure milligrams and millimeters. The smaller the data points you measure, the faster you see progress and the more you feel motivated to continue. Emulate practice, not performance. The top performance we see on screens or on stage is the result of endless hard work behind the curtain. If you want to become as good as Pavarotti in the opera or as skillful as Messi with the ball, don't watch them perform, study how they practice. Repetition makes perfect. In the 1990s, a team of German psychologists revealed that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become a professional violinist. A similar study concluded it takes almost as long to become a great cigar maker. New workers in a Cuban cigar factory take around 25 seconds to make one cigar. After 100,000 repetitions, it takes them just 15 seconds, and after 1 million, only 8. To reach peak performance, it takes 7 years and 10 million repetitions of the same hand movements. Not practice, but repetition makes perfect. Professional football teams therefore play daily what the Spanish players call rondo. Piano players warm up with scales and arpeggios. Routine is everything. To reach mastery, young Shaolin monks get up at 5:30 a.m., then chant, eat breakfast, and practice 2 hours of Kung Fu. At 11:30, they have a vegetarian lunch with no liquids to aid digestion. At around 3 p.m., they practice another 2 hours. At 5:30 is dinner, followed by chanting. At 8, meditation. At 10, time for bed. Us normal people can start with 15 minutes every day and then slowly increase our session. Get a coach. The job of a coach is to show us our true potential and then guide us in the right direction. If you don't have a coach, look for one. It can be a teacher, a friend, or even someone you find or follow online. For our favorite teachers and coaches, visit our Sprouts channel page and check out our playlists. The Dalai Lama believes deliberate practice not only works for muscles, but also for our mind. He and other wise minds deliberately practice taking other people's anger, suspicion, and mistrust and then giving them patience, tolerance, and compassion in return. What do you think about deliberate practice? Can we also use it for training our thinking skills? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
So this whole concept of deliberate practice can be used for, well, just about anything. I do know a therapist up in Chicago. His name is Scott Miller, and he just loves his deliberate practice. Came up with this scale, which he teaches people to use to incrementally get better and better as therapists. Fascinating stuff. You can, if you're interested in becoming a therapist and as well as using deliberate practice, it's scottdmiller.com. All of his stuff is available for free. And this whole how he uses deliberate practice to improve therapy is pretty much fascinating. So I would actually encourage everybody to look into deliberate practice
is a mindful and highly structured form of learning by doing. It's a process of continued experimentation to first achieve mastery and eventually full automaticity of a specific skill. A 2014 study published in Psychological Science argues that it can increase our performance by 26% in games, 21% in music, and 18% in sports. Here are some tips on how to do it well. Define success and drill deliberately. Define all the elements you need to practice to become successful. Then drill each element deliberately, one after the other. In tennis, that could be first your serves and then later your leg work. If you want to become a professional barista, first perfect your moves to make the espresso, then your skills to serve the ideal coffee. Plan, reflect, and take notes. Plan out your practice routine, for example in a notebook. After each session, reflect and write down what you've discovered. What worked? What didn't? The idea is to get a clear sense of how a particular session improves your skills, and then to experiment to find new and even better ways to achieve your goals. Go slow. To build a good foundation of muscle memory, practice slow and correctly. If we move too fast, we risk learning and internalizing the wrong skills, which can bring terrible consequences. To achieve mastery, our brain needs time to develop. So start slow and then gradually increase the speed until you give it all you've got. Limit your sessions to focus. Deliberate practice is hard mental work. Limit the sessions to a reasonable duration that allows you to stay focused. This may be 15 minutes if you are younger and 60 minutes if you are older. Cristiano Ronaldo does around 3 to 4 hours of football training a day. Young Shaolin monks practice 2 hours in the morning and 2 hours in the afternoon. To keep their attention high, they switch the style of practice every 10 minutes. Maximize practice time. Legendary basketball coach John Wooden used to let each of his players practice putting on socks and shoes so that they learned to do it really fast. By doing this, he maximized the time to practice throwing the ball and discussing game strategy with his team. Track small intervals of improvement. If you practice running 800 meters, count the milliseconds, not the minutes. If you are working out or practice controlling your diet, measure milligrams and millimeters. The smaller the data points you measure, the faster you see progress and the more you feel motivated to continue. Emulate practice, not performance. The top performance we see on screens or on stage is the result of endless hard work behind the curtain. If you want to become as good as Pavarotti in the opera or as skillful as Messi with the ball, don't watch them perform, study how they practice. Repetition makes perfect. In the 1990s, a team of German psychologists revealed that it takes 10,000 hours of deliberate practice to become a professional violinist. A similar study concluded it takes almost as long to become a great cigar maker. New workers in a Cuban cigar factory take around 25 seconds to make one cigar. After 100,000 repetitions, it takes them just 15 seconds, and after 1 million, only 8. To reach peak performance, it takes 7 years and 10 million repetitions of the same hand movements. Not practice, but repetition makes perfect. Professional football teams therefore play daily what the Spanish players call rondo. Piano players warm up with scales and arpeggios. Routine is everything. To reach mastery, young Shaolin monks get up at 5:30 a.m., then chant, eat breakfast, and practice 2 hours of Kung Fu. At 11:30, they have a vegetarian lunch with no liquids to aid digestion. At around 3 p.m., they practice another 2 hours. At 5:30 is dinner, followed by chanting. At 8, meditation. At 10, time for bed. Us normal people can start with 15 minutes every day and then slowly increase our session. Get a coach. The job of a coach is to show us our true potential and then guide us in the right direction. If you don't have a coach, look for one. It can be a teacher, a friend, or even someone you find or follow online. For our favorite teachers and coaches, visit our Sprouts channel page and check out our playlists. The Dalai Lama believes deliberate practice not only works for muscles, but also for our mind. He and other wise minds deliberately practice taking other people's anger, suspicion, and mistrust and then giving them patience, tolerance, and compassion in return. What do you think about deliberate practice? Can we also use it for training our thinking skills? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
We've now covered an awful lot of things. We've covered stuff like multiple intelligences. We've covered how to develop your talent. We have covered, covered deliberate practice. We've covered an awful lot in this little lecture. And yet, there's still stuff that we really do have to talk about. And that's when we come down to this, your willingness to actually work and do a job and really be successful at your job. So how many hours a week would you be willing to work in a job you love? The average person changes their career 5 times. This doesn't include the 6 times they changed their major in college. But the average person changes their job, their career 5 times. Maybe it didn't work out. Maybe they just fell out of interest in something. Maybe they just didn't get the reinforcements. Maybe they just fell out of love with their job. What if that didn't happen? What if you absolutely loved your job? There are people who go into jobs, like people go into situations like nursing, where they might think, oh, this is a great job. It's certainly a very secure job, but maybe it doesn't work out because there is a burnout rate for nurses. You also have a high burnout rate for teachers and for physicians. And some people just don't really love their job, especially not after a while. There's of course other reasons that they change their job, that maybe they really were okay with computers, but they get affected by the dot-com bust, which I did. Maybe they jump into a job and just never really knew what was in it because maybe they didn't do their shadowing. Which, by the way, shadowing whatever job you like is really a great idea if you can do stuff. And then you'll hopefully not join a job you don't like, and maybe instead of changing careers 5 times a lifetime, maybe you'll only do it twice. But there is also this old saying that if you love your job, you'll never work a day in your life because you'll enjoy what you're doing. So how many hours a week would you be willing to actually work in the job that you love? Somebody did a little bit of a survey about that type of thing. I have to see if I can use my highlighter here. For this top bar, people looked at graduate students in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math, as well as people who were very, very gifted. And they looked at how many hours they worked per week. So we have the men on the left, women on the right, and the darker ones are the graduate students. The lighter one is the gifted and talented search. As you can see, this is how many hours per week people worked. I mean, not bad. A lot of people working around 40 to 49 hours. That seems reasonable. And that's what they're right now just doing. But if they're looking at what they're willing to work per week in an ideal job, look at what some of those numbers look like now. Well, yeah, we had several people that were already working 60 plus hours a week. Let's see, for the grad students, you have what, like 25%, and the profoundly gifted, whatever, 19%. When we look at least as far as the men go, I'm just doing it on this side, and women. Okay, so women, just to be fair, the talented women, 15%, and I don't know, what is that, like 19%, 18%, whatever. We're working over 60 hours a week. So now if they could do any job they wanted, that their ideal job that they loved to do, how many hours are they working? At the 60 plus hour, now 40% of men in each group. And women, you're looking still a little bit over 20%. You're looking at, what is that, maybe 33%. And still, you also see the 50 to 59 hours increase somewhat. And this is an important thing to note, that if these people were all willing to work more if they loved what they did. Because these people were working more, they probably were getting better and better at whatever it is that they were working on. They were more likely to put in that work, which meant they got better at things that they were interested in. And if looking at the graduate students, I don't know what the talented people were actually up to, but the graduate students, probably a fair amount of them are going to go into academia, or are going to try at some level to go into academia. And in academia, there's this thing called tenure, that if you work for the university at the tenure track level, assistant professor level, for a certain amount of years, you're eligible to put in for a tenured position, which means you will never get fired, basically. Effectively, that's what it means. I'm not on a tenure track position at the moment, so tenure is something that seems very, very far off. But let's look at people. So the top people, this is how many hours they work per week versus the people that love their job. Which of these groups is more likely to get tenure? Just based on how many hours they're putting in. Professors are not hired actually to be your teachers. They're actually hired to be researchers. So teaching is just something, for the most part, some additional thing that gets tacked on. But a research university, they're definitely being hired for research purposes. So who's going to get the tenure? The people who are these people who I think the majority of them are hitting the 40 to 50 hour, or 50 to 55. Or I'm sorry, 50 to 59? Or are these people who really like their job, where, I mean, heck, the graduate students just doing 60 plus and 50 to 59, that's 80% of the people. 80% of the people are over 50 hours a week. Which one is more likely to get tenure? When push comes to shove, it's going to be most likely these people who really, really love their job. So it's really important for you guys to find something you love. It's really more important. Because you like it, you're probably going to get better at it, which means you're going to spend more time working on it. Like I said, master it, and probably in the long run actually make more money. So I would just like to point that out. But that's what this whole thing is coming down to. You should really love what you do for a living. Let's hop over to the discussion questions. So here are a few of your discussion questions. Besides what you do and what you like, are there any other factors that you might want to look at when you're making these types of choices about learning and work settings? There probably are. And some things, you may also have to look at stuff like your disabilities, whether you're able to do the thing or not. So you may need to look at that stuff. Why are abilities and interests not sufficient for conceptualizing basically types of development? Well, there are a lot of things you can think of for that. Is it better to be interested in a topic or good at the topic? And do you see a place for deliberate practice in the context of education? These are all really good questions to think about, and everybody will probably have their own little answer, so I'm not really going to go into extreme details about it. But these are certainly things to look at and consider. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, send me an email, drop me a note down below, and I will try to get right back to you. So hope you guys have a great day, and I'll be seeing you around.